Hello. Most nights on patrol are quiet in a way you only understand from the driver's seat at 3 a.m. The dash light soft on your hands, the radio a low whisper, the world folded into empty parking lots, and porch lights left on by habit. But every now and then there's a call that doesn't wrap up clean. No big chase, no big headline. Just a line that opens and lets in a draft from somewhere you can't put your finger on. The kind of call where the silence says as much as the words, where your own footsteps sound borrowed, and you feel watched by a place, not a person. I'm not telling these to scare you off to sleep. I'm telling them the way we pass time in briefing, the way we pass it in the car when nothing else fills the air because some calls never really clear from the CAD, not in your head anyway. I can't give names or exact addresses, and I'm not interested in making anything bigger than it was. But what follows are 7 calls that stayed with the officers who took them. 7 different places, 7 different nights, all told exactly the way they were. Lived quiet, ordinary, and then not. If you're listening in the dark, that's fine. That's how we learn them too. Low voice, steady, with no reason to look over your shoulder, except the ones your body can't help. Story number 1. I was working nights in a county along the Gulf, southern enough that the air sticks to your uniform and the pine needles shine under the cruiser's spotlight. It was late summer and a Tuesday into Wednesday, the kind of shift where you're grateful for the simple stuff: bar checks, a welfare check that turns into a cat in an attic, noise complaints that are stage whispers by the time you get there. My call sign was 1-2 that year. It was a little after 2 when dispatch hit the tone. Unit 12, copy a 911 open line. Plotting to the old marathon on County 14. Caller number comes back to a payphone. No voice, just open line and wind noise. A payphone. I blinked at the dash and glanced at my partner's empty seat. We'd been single-man units since budget cuts. 12, I'll take it. Any other units close? K9 is tied up on a vehicle stop in the north end. Nearest back is 14 minutes. Copy, I'll be in the area. The marathon had been closed since before I got hired. Hurricane shuttered it, and the owner never reopened. The front windows were boarded with gray plywood, and the pumps were wrapped in plastic that had bleached to a chalky white. Every few weeks we got a 911 hang-up plotted to that address. Usually the line would be dead by the time I pulled in. We'd chalk it up to a crossed wire or a line test. You check the doors, tug the lock, flash the light, and clear. County 14 runs narrow there, fenced on both sides by scrub oak and waist-high weeds. The station sits back off the shoulder in a wide gravel apron with a rusted sign frame that used to hold prices. I cut my lights 100 yards out and coasted in with just my parking lamps. The air had that flat, sweet smell of old gasoline, like someone had spilled it years ago, and the earth never stopped remembering. The CAD still showed the line as open. Dispatch came back in my ear. Unit 12, be advised the line is still up. I can't get a voice, but I'm hearing a rhythmic, I don't want to say a chime. Wind chime? And a distant rumble, like a train? There's no train out there, right? No train, I said, stepping out into the heat. You're sure on the plot? Phase 2 to the payphone listing inside the station. Number registered to a decommissioned line. But it's what the ALI gives me. Same number as the last 3 times. I swept my light across the boarded windows and the gas pumps. Nothing moved but a moth. The old ice freezer was still bolted down, lid buckled, the words, fresh ice flaking away. I could hear crickets and the soft tick of my engine. No chimes, no rumble. Payphones haven't been a thing around here in a while. When the station closed, the phone company took the metal box off the frame and left the anchor bolts in the concrete like something pulled out of a mouth. The pedestal was still there, 4 bolts in a square, and a stain where hands had rested for years while coins went in. I crossed the apron and kept my light low, more for my own eyes than anything. The front door was a sheet of plywood screwed through the frame. The back door, if you walked the narrow path around the building, opened onto weeds and a dumpster that hadn't seen a hauler in a decade. Dispatch, I'm on scene, I said. I'm going to walk the perimeter. Copy. Line still open. There's a moment on calls like that where time takes a deep breath. It's just you and a box you can't see into. You start hearing your belt squeak and your own breathing through the mic. I could feel sweat between my vest and shirt. Nothing jumped at me. Nothing does most nights. I rounded the corner slow, light sweeping, and saw the back door sitting almost shut. Not latched. The frame had swelled, and the metal had bit into the wood, so it held an inch shy of closing. That bought me my lawful reason to go in, which I appreciated. You don't force doors over a phone phantom, but an unlocked door on a property with an active 911 plot is different. I called it out because it's the right thing to do. Back door appears unsecured, I said. I'm going to check inside. Copy. 12. I still have open line. No voice. I put my glove on, nudged the door with the heel of my hand, and let it slide in against its grind. The smell that came out was old mop water and dust. I lit the threshold and announced, "Sheriff's office." My voice hit shelves and empty coolers and died. The back room was the stock area milk crates, broken down cardboard, a metal rack with nuts and bolts, a clipboard curling with humidity. The only light was what my flashlight gave it. The floor was gritty under my boots. I called out again and moved forward, free hand away from the holster, beam high then low. I've cleared houses where people are waiting, and houses where nothing has breathed for months. This felt like the latter, but there was this other thing too, an absence I can't explain except to say the usual background noise, crickets, road grind, electric buzz, didn't seem to follow me inside. I could still hear them, but as if from down a long hallway instead of 3 feet behind me. The door into the front sold area was a half door with a swinging hinge. I eased it, listened, eased it again, stepped through. You could tell where the counter had been set, because the tile there wasn't yellowed. The register was gone, but the counter had a dark ring where the monitor used to sit. On the wall behind the counter was the phone company's demarcation point, a gray box with a padlock, some conduit up into the ceiling. The junction for the old payphone line would have been in there, terminated years ago. I stood and listened. Sheriff's office. Call out to me. If someone's here, make yourself known. I said it normal, not loud. You don't shout in a box. And then I heard it, a faint, regular beep from the front of the store. Not a siren. Not a smoke detector chirp. The kind of beep a cooler makes when it's warm. 3 quick beeps every so often, bright and flat. Something about it made the tiny muscles around my eyes tense. I angled my light toward the glass door coolers that lined the front wall. Most were empty, just wire shelves and dust. The LED readouts on some were blank. But the second from the right had a little digital display blinking 0 and a small red light next to it. I stepped closer and held my breath. I could hear it clearly now. Beep, beep, beep. Pause. Beep, beep, beep. The sound of a machine trying to get attention after being ignored for a long time. Dispatch, I said, quiet. You mentioned a chime earlier. You still have the line up? Affirmative. I don't know how to say this. 12. The cadence on the line sounds like what you're describing. 3 high beeps, then pause. There's also, stand by. I stood by. The light made a tight, perfect circle on the cooler's handle. The rest of the world was edges. Unit 12, I just heard the call. Taker prompt on the line. 911, what's the address of your emergency? That's me. But I didn't say it. It sounded like our script played back through a tin can. Then it's wind noise again, that same beep you're hearing. I'm sorry, this is weird. Copy. My mouth went a little dry. There are explanations. Phones get cross-connected. Old lines sing to each other when it's damp. But there was something second-person about the feeling in that room. Like the store itself had all the time in the world and was indifferent to me spending a sliver of it there. I swept the light toward the front. Where the payphone pedestal had been, there was an outline on the tile floor. A cleaner square where dirt had curled its lip around the base all these years. And never quite got under. Above that spot on the wall, 2 tiny screw holes and a rectangle of less faded paint. I stepped over to it and reached out without thinking, touching the wall where the receiver would have hung. The cinder block was cool, a little damp from the night. Nothing happened. Of course nothing happened. Dispatch. Can you attempt a callback on that line? I asked. I know it's nonsense, but humor me. Stand by. I stood in a shuttered store at 2-something in the morning and listened to emptiness call out like a machine that wanted its job back. The radio popped. 12. When I hit callback, the system just says, number not in service, but the open line, Still up. I'm going to conference you in. If it's dead, it's dead. If not, I want you to hear what I'm hearing so I don't feel like I'm writing a novel. A second later, there was a double chirp in my earpiece, and then it was there, thin and far, like it had to travel across an empty stadium to get to me. The sound of wind fussing with something metal, the soft hum that lives in telephone lines like a state of being, and that beeping. The way the beeps lined up with the light on the cooler made my scalp want to tighten. The cooler would beep, and a breath later the line would beep, or the line would, then the cooler just offset. Brothers not quite in step. 911, what's the address of your emergency? Came through. Pitched up like it was being played through a small speaker. But dispatch hadn't said it. I looked at the cooler, at my own light on it, and had the sideways idea I might be on the wrong side of glass. Dispatch, I said, keeping my voice as ordinary as I could. Are you playing back the prompt? No. That's what I mean. It's not me. It's my voice. Recording? Except we don't have that function upstream of the recorder. And if it were playback, it wouldn't be going out on the line. I've got IT on another line. They're saying the call is coming in on a number that should throw an automatic reject. Except it didn't. And here we are. I walked behind the counter where a staffer would have stood, and I put my gloved hand on the demarcation box. Locked. Dusty. I traced the conduit with my light. It ran up into a drop ceiling panel that had sagged in the humidity. Above the panel, all I'd find would be more wire, dead-end runs, maybe a mouse nest. I stayed on the ground. If you've ever stood in a place that used to be busy and now is not, you know the particular kind of stillness that comes with that. It's not like walking into a forest where the land doesn't care whether you're there. This is a stillness that remembers being otherwise and isn't done yet replaying it. 12, for what it's worth, dispatch said quietly. The call just started a clock in CAD. 32 minutes elapsed. It just appears. Which, I don't know. The system doesn't do that. Calls run. Times count up. We don't get timers on lines that were never answered. Except here I am, watching it count. Copy. My light caught a stain on the counter where someone had spilled coffee years ago. The outline of a ring, a half moon left by a cup. I felt, and I know this sounds dramatic, but I felt like I had walked into a room mid-conversation. Not a loud one. Just the end of something that had been said all day, every day, for years, and that tonight wasn't ready to stop even if no one was listening. 911, what's your emergency? Can you think of a sentence more worn in than that? I stood in the empty store and could feel words worn smooth like a banister. I checked the office space, a little room off the back with a safe I couldn't open, and a desk with a calendar from 8 summers ago. There were handwritten notes by the phone jack. Manager on call, a local number that area code had been split since. The note said, in block letters, if system fails, call 911. You learn not to read too much into things when you don't have the full picture. But I read it anyway, and let the thought pass like a bird across the Sunday. Dispatch, I said. See if you can get a telco tech to note this. You've got an anomaly on your end. I've got the back door insecure. I'm going to secure the rear, then I'll lock a courtesy padlock and leave a note for the property owner. There's no one in here. Copy. Tech is listening. You're not the only agency that's had this location call in. Hold. The lines... It's cleared. It just cleared. Timer froze at 32. And change. And now it's gone. In the same instant, the cooler stopped beeping. I've had coincidences line up on calls where everything was perfectly normal. Lights flicker when I look toward them because the A divided by C kicks on. Dogs go quiet because another dog barked 3 houses down. Life fills the gaps. I didn't stand there and perform a ceremony. I didn't ask the room questions. I did the next thing I was trained to do, which was prop the back with a door wedge while I confirmed that no one was sleeping in a stockroom. No one was tucked behind a soda rack. I climbed back into the night, marked my presence with crime scene tape across the back because it was all I had to deter a return in the next few hours, and I jotted the case number on a sticky and left it under the weather stripping where an owner might see it. On the way back to the car, my light caught the old payphone pedestal again. The holes in the tile lined up just so, like a little four-cornered absence. On impulse, I crouched and put my hand flat on the square of clean floor, palm over where the coins would have fallen. The tile was cooler there. It shouldn't have been. Maybe there was a void beneath and the night air had settled. I stood. I made a mental note to not mention that part in my report. Back in the driver's seat, I let the A divided by C hit my face and watched the station sit. The insects got loud again, or maybe I noticed them again. A stray dog ghosted across the lot and looked at me like it knew I had nothing for it. I cleared the call. 12. Scene is secure. Unable to locate any person. Back door resecured. Would you please log telephone anomaly and forward to telco? Copy 12. It's already in. And, it is asking a question I can't answer. How were you hearing the open line? We didn't actually patch your radio to it. I had it in my headset. I looked at the radio like it was a frog. You didn't patch me? No. When I said I was going to, I got a busy signal. And then you answered my question about the chime like you were hearing it. I figured you were picking it up ambient. I was, I said. From the cooler. And the prompt? I didn't have an answer that made me feel any less foolish. Maybe I just said it in my head, I said, which was not an answer at all. It would make a neater story if the calls stopped after that night. They didn't. Every couple weeks, off and on, a plot would hit the old station, and someone would go drive the gravel and tug the back door and shine a beam into empty glass. Sometimes the line stayed open long enough for dispatch to say, "I'm hearing the thing again." Sometimes it hung up before we even got our seatbelts on. Months later, a telco repairman called me on a Tuesday, said he was in the area and remembered our case number. He'd pulled the old service map and explained that payphone dial-outs didn't route like residential lines. There was legacy equipment in a box miles from there. A box that wasn't physically connected to anything in that building anymore. But that wasn't smart enough to know it. Moisture, heat, load, the fittings in the cabinet expanded and made a circuit they didn't mean to. A ghost call, he said. He used that exact term and laughed before I could. He said it like phantom toll. He told me all the reasons. They were solid reasons. They made sense, and I believed him. But even when I retell it to myself with his explanation first, I'm still standing in that empty store, hearing a cooler beep in an empty room while a line that shouldn't dial made a 911 operator's greeting come from nowhere in my ear. There was nothing dramatic. No shadows in the corner. No windows breaking. I signed my name, I went back to my car, and the night held. If you drive that stretch now, the marathon's just a low shape behind vines. I've been by during daylight on the way to something else, and felt nothing. Still, sometimes when the radio falls quiet, and the clock crawls toward 3, and the air gets heavy, I'll think I hear 3 quick, bright beeps from a far room, and I'll feel for a second like a place once wired to 100 daily routines is still trying to do its job, reaching out down lines that aren't there, asking the same question it asked 1,000 times a day, every day. 911, what's your emergency? Story number 2. I work a patch that's mostly late-night takeaways, tired terraces, and a tower block that sits like a dark filing cabinet against the sky. We call dispatch control, and most of what they send us is predictable missing people who come home halfway through the search, noise complaints that quiet the second we pull up. Winter makes it quieter still. You can hear your own footsteps in the stairwells. That night was January. Air sharp enough to sting the inside of your nose, a steady drizzle turning the pavements black. We were double crewed for once me driving, my partner in the passenger seat half reading the log, half making noises about the tea going cold. It was about 2 in the morning when Control pinged us. Sierra 2, 1, Control. I. Grade silent 999 with silent solution pressed. AML. Plotting to Borthwick House, level 8 walkway area. Female network profile, line open. Any other units attending, stand by. I keyed up. Sierra 2-1, show us taking. Any further? Pause, the soft hum of the airwave. Caller pressed 55, line remained silent. We've got wind noise and possibly a TV in the background? Hard to tell. The phone's GPS jumped between stairwell and lift lobby on 8 and 9. No flat number. Backup 5, minutes behind you. Silent 999 seconds aren't rare. You treat them properly because sometimes they're the only way someone can tell you to come without making anything worse where they are. Pressing 55 tells the handler you can't speak. We don't barge doors over a map dot. You knock, you listen, you try to work out which door feels wrong. And if it's wrong enough, you use Section 17 power of entry to save life, and you'll stand in a stranger's hall before you've thought about your gloves. Borthwick House has seen better decades. Brick and concrete, square as a thought, long walkways with the flats opening off them like doors in a hotel. The lift smells of damp and chip fat even when it's been cleaned. We turned off the main road, rolled under the orange glow of the street lamps, and parked up under the block where the signage is always half-shadowed by the overhang. The only lights at that hour were blue televisions through curtains and a stairwell strip flickering with a cold stutter. A fox trotted the length of the grass like it had a reason to be late for something. I told Control we were on scene and got the usual acknowledgement in a voice that sounded smaller than the building around us. You feel the scale of places like that. 10 floors of people sleeping behind wood and metal, 10 floors of arguments, kettles, radiators, clicking as they cool, lives stacked like files. If you listen hard enough, you can hear the hot water pipes carry conversations you're not meant to hear. We hit the lift first. Out of order. Folded to one side with tape. Of course. We started the stairs. My partner's breath fogged in front of him and went without a sound. Old cement, voice echoing a fraction too long. On the first landing, someone had scrawled a phone number and a name inside a heart. On the fifth, there was a sticker of a gold star stuck above the 5 on the sign, curled at one point like a petal. Control came in as our boots hit 7. Update. The handset's GPS just drifted to the north stairwell between 7 and 8, still showing as on the line. We can hear movement on the call, but it's so faint it could be your stairwell. Are you on the north? I glanced at the painted compass rose someone had inked on the wall years ago, with N and an arrow pointing to the stairwell window that faced the car park. Affirmative. North stairs. Copy. On 8, the door opened onto the long walkway. Cold air pushed in from the wind that finds its way around corners. The concrete had a slick of fine moisture. Flats 81 to 88 inches a neat line, the metal railings holding the day at arm's length. Somewhere, a radio was playing low, one of the older stations where the songs feel like furniture. I called out the way we always do. Police, if you've called for us, open up or give me a knock. My voice felt too loud for the hours. We started at 81. Listen first. A television, but far inside. No voices. We knocked the courtesy way knuckles, not the baton. No answer. Same with 82. On the door of 83, there was a peephole with tape over it from the inside. 84 had a pram folded up next to it, dust on the wheels like it hadn't moved since the last warm day. Control again. Softer. Sierra 2-1. The call just shifted. AML says you're within 4 meters. We're getting a sort of not quite breathing. Can you see anyone on the walkway? No visuals. It's quiet. We listened. You can tell the difference between a flat that's empty and a flat that's asleep. There's a density to an empty place. Nothing compresses the air. I put my palm to 85's door. Cold, like the rest. 86 had a little brass plaque instead of a number, and a narrow gap at the bottom where the draft excluder should have been. 87's letterbox had a bit of post poking out. 88 was a blue door, where someone had painted over a dent. The paintbrush marks showed you the strokes. We got to the corner by the stair door again, and I looked at the lift lobby through the square of glass. The lift car was on 9, the indicator a dull red 9 shining like a cooker left on. The button for 8 was lit too, a soft amber that flicked out as we watched and then came back, as if someone had pressed and unpressed it from inside a pocket. My partner looked at me, eyebrows up. I keyed. Control, do we have any other units in the block? No. Backup is just turning in. Why? Lift indicator is showing activity. 8 called, car at 9. Possibly just a fault. We'll check the 9 walkway. We took the stairs up one more flight. The door onto 9 opened easier than 8's had. For a second, I had the feeling you get when you walk in on a conversation that stopped a heartbeat before. The air felt held. Flats 91 to 98. The same radio station, 2 floors up, someone on a night shift sleeping with it on low. A smoke alarm somewhere was chirping the occasional protest about needing a battery. Chirp. Long pause. Chirp. I've been in houses where that chirp is the only noise for days. Before we could start knocking again, Control came in with a tone I didn't recognize. Sierra 2. 1. Are you transmitting? We're hearing police open up on the 999 line. It sounds like you, but I don't have your PTT lit. I glanced at my handset. Not transmitting. Negative. We're on 9. We've called out to the doors. You're hearing that on the caller's side? Affirmative. It's the same phrase you used a minute ago, but it's slightly delayed, like it's bounced. I've got the call taker with me. The lines still live. No other voice. My partner mouthed, "What?" I lifted a hand. We went to 92. No answer. 93 had light around the edges, and a shadow moved across the hall. You don't kick a door because you see a shadow. We knocked again, called through the letterbox that we were the police, responding to a 999 call, and asked them to come to the door if they called us, or to knock if they couldn't speak. Silence. Then, from somewhere far down the walkway, the sound of the stairwell door closing, not slamming, just the hydraulic closer doing its slow pull, the soft thud at the end. We both froze. The sound, down that long concrete throat, should have echoed. It didn't. It fell down like a curtain. Control, I said, keeping my voice even. Do we still have movement on the caller? Negative on movement. The dot's static near the north stairwell, 9. Then it drifted to the lift lobby. We can hear the stair door on the line. We can also hear your boots. Are you near the door? Yes. We edged to the lobby again. The lift indicator was at 8 now, the amber button for 9 lit. Then 8 again. A pendulum, with no clock. The chirp from the smoke alarm still came every so often, and with each chirp, I had the feeling I get in an empty building, like the space isn't empty so much as paused. It's in there. It's just not moving right now. Any flat on 9 with a lifeline telecare box? My partner asked Control. We're hearing a battery chirp. Could be a call pendant that's malfunctioned, routed to 999 by mistake. Stand by. The seconds were longer than they should have been. We've got 2 residents on 9 registered with telecare. One of them is 95. I'll ring their scheme. The call taker's saying the line's gone extremely quiet, by the way. Almost like someone put their hand over the microphone. We tried 95. Knock. Identification through the letterbox. The letterbox flap lifted from the inside a fraction, then set down again. That second person feeling tightened behind my eyes again, like when you realize someone's in a room you thought was empty. I kept my voice friendly. Police. We're attending a call in the block. If you need us, pop the chain on and let us have a chat. If you don't, that's fine too. A long pause. The chain lifted, the door opened a hand's width. The smell of furniture polish and something floral drifted out. An older woman looked at us through the gap with the particular caution you learn from living that high up with that many doors. I didn't ring you, she said, almost a whisper. Is something happening? We had a call from this floor, I said. We're just checking everyone's okay. Is it her? She asked, and then shook her head as if she'd said more than she meant to. That was unkind of me. I'm sorry. Power's been funny tonight. The lights went bright and then very dim. The lift's been doing that thing again. What thing? Coming and not coming, she said, and gave a breath that could have been a laugh if we'd been having a different sort of chat. You wait, and it stops 1 floor off, and stands there like it's thinking about it. Behind us, the lift indicator changed again. 8. 9. 8. We thanked her, didn't push, and carried on. Control came back. Telecare schemes confirmed no alarm activations from 95 tonight. They can't see any on 9. The 999 line just... Did you hear that? I don't know how to describe it. Imagine putting a seashell to your ear. It was that. Then the call timer jumped forward and froze, and now it's still connected, but with nothing. I still have a GPS ping at your location, but the system's calling it stale. We carried on the checks. It wasn't nothing. There's a function to the walkthrough, a rhythm to it that calms the nerves. Knock, listen, stairs, knock, listen. On 10, the plant room door had a sign with authorized access only faded to a ghost. The handle was scuffed with paint and use. It clicked when I tried it and didn't move. We put our ears to it and heard the building making its own interior weather, something expanding and cooling, a whir somewhere that shouldn't be a whir at that hour. I shone my torch through the wired glass panel. Big fans stood still behind them, the kind you see in car parks, blades like crosses in the dark. My own light came back at me with the noise flattened down to nothing. On 11, a door sat open on the latch. We announced, as you do, stepped to the threshold, peered into a hallway lined with shoes. The house was very, very clean. A clock on the wall with a long pendulum made no sound at all. A red light on a plug by the skirting board blinked in a slow heartbeat. My partner, who has more superstitions than he admits to, made a small face. I called out again. No reply. I was about to call control for a name for the resident when a voice behind us said, "Everything all right, lads?" And a man with a takeaway bag slid past to the flat across the way and went inside, no more bothered by the scene than if we'd been delivering a parcel. The lid of the plant room hummed in my head like a phantom sound. The radio hissed, cleared, control's voice tiny. "The line has just disconnected. No click, no end tone. It just went. Can you make any further?" "Backup's with you on the ground. We made floor 12 to be thorough." On the way back down, I checked the lift button and watched it glow and unglow under my thumb without any difference to the way the car did not arrive. We went back to 9 one more time, and in that soft space between thinking and speaking, I found myself listening the way you do at home when you wake at 3 and hear the fridge hum and imagine footsteps that are just your own breath, making a pattern. Every block has a personality. Some are noisy, some avoid you. Borthwick felt, that night, like it was listening too. We cleared with control as no trace of any incident, because there wasn't anything more we could justify. You can't manufacture grounds. We updated the CAD, left the incident open for a bit in case the line came back, wrote that we'd be happy to attend again if there was another ping. On the way back to the car park, we passed the notice board by the entrance. A flyer about the lift being repaired next week. A paper Christmas tree made by the kids in someone's flat, tacked with a drawing pin so old the metal had gone dull. Back in the motor, the heater working on our faces, I watched the lift indicator through the gap between buildings. The light went from 9 to 8 and stayed there as steady as if it had been doing that all night. Behind my ribs, something let go that I hadn't realized I was holding. Later, in the canteen, control sent me the timing. Call received at 1:58. Silent solution pressed within 20 seconds. AML plotted to level 8. Drift to 9. Call lasted 27 minutes by the system clock. We were with the doors for 15 of those. The prompts the call taker uses the very first line, "Emergency, which service do you require?" had been captured on the recording, but we hadn't heard it on the radio. My "police open up" went down the 999 line, although my PTT was dead. Comms put it down to an upstream echo, signal leak. One of those things. They are solid reasons, and I believe them. Still, whenever I think about that walkway, I feel my footsteps come back to me a half second later, and I'm not sure if it's the concrete or the night returning them. 2 weeks after, we were back for something ordinary, a neighbor dispute about parking. The lift was working. On the 9th floor landing, someone had left a battery in a dish by the door, like an offering smoke alarm replacement, brand new. The chirp had stopped. I don't know if that was the thing, and I wouldn't claim it even if I did. We test things, we knock, we go when there's nothing to hold us, and sometimes we leave feeling like a place had more to say. We put it on the log and drive to the next thing. I still listen for the slow thud of a stair door when the radio falls quiet. Sometimes, at just the right hour, it sounds as if the building breathes out and settles and waits. And sometimes I think about a call that started somewhere between 8 and 9 and didn't say a word and still asked us to come. Story number 3. I was on nights out of a small coastal station in Queensland. Sugar mills on one side, black water creeks and cane fields on the other. Humidity sits with you up there like an extra layer, and the night doesn't go quiet. It just changes its instruments. Geckos on the eaves, cane toads in the verge, the long line of insects that only ever stop when you notice them. We run lean after midnight. If you're lucky, you've got another car somewhere within 10 minutes. If you're not, it's your torch, your radio, and the part of you that likes the waiting. Comms hit the tone a bit after 2. Alpha 4-5. Copy a 000 open line. Automated crash detection. AML ping putting it off. Old quarry road by the cane tram tracks. No voice, line still open. Phones showing as an iOS device. I keyed up and turned the wheel toward the back roads. Alpha 45 I'll take. Any ambulance en route? QAS are aware. Staging on the highway until we confirm. No reports from passing motorists. Be advised, the AML drifted about 40 meters in the last minute. Looks like the device is moving or being bounced. Your nearest backup is 15 out. Old Quarry Road is more a suggestion than a road once you leave the last streetlights. The bitumen becomes patched gravel, then shoulder, then ruts. Sugar cane stands high on both sides, blade edges whispering together whenever the night wind turns directions. There's a service track that snakes alongside the cane tram line, a narrow gauge that carries little wagons of cut cane to the mill in harvest season. In the off months, it looks like a toy railway someone forgot to put away. The crash detection calls are a new flavor of weird. Most times they're a false trip phone dropped off a ute, hard brake at a roundabout, that sort of thing. But once in a while someone's in a bad spot off the road where no one drives. And the phone doing exactly what it's meant to do is the only reason we find them. You treat each one as if the good outcome is on you. As I turned off the highway, comms came back soft. Alpha 45. The call taker is hearing a repeating tone in the background. Not a siren. Like a ticking? The automated message played once, but was garbled. We've got the coordinates loaded in CAD marking your waypoint. I didn't ask them to play the message. Sometimes you don't need the recording to know what you already know. The moon was a thin sliver. My bar light threw gray across the cane and the rail. Every now and then a cane toad's eyes picked up the reflection and blinked camera flash red. I pulled up at the gate to the service track, hopped out, and worked the chain through the first notch. No padlock, just old habits. The gate gave with that hollow clank you hear in paddocks and on farms, and the grass brushed my trousers as I pushed through. Sweet green smell even at that hour, like cut melons left in the sun and then moved to shade. "Comms, I'm out on foot," I said, clipping the torch to my vest so the beam followed my eyes. "I'll start at your last ping and walk the line." "Copy. AML shows you within 10 meters. QAS are still staged. The line remains open." I kept the torch low. Bugs travel to it like people to a lighted window and pile up in your eyelashes if you're not careful. The rails looked snug in the ballast. Every 15 meters, a timber sleeper sat with a white paint marker like a row of stitches. The cane rustled with something small moving through it, probably a bandicoot or my head making animals out of nothing. Curlews called in the distance, that wailing sound that makes a lot of people think someone's in trouble in the dark. At first I didn't hear the ticking. I heard my own steps in the dry grass, the click of the radio clip when I reached up to it, the scritch of a gecko somewhere over my head where there was no ceiling. And then, faint and not in any rhythm the night should have, a tick. Pause. Tick. The exact sound an indicator makes when the hazards are on. In a city, you don't hear it unless you're close to the car. Out here, where there's nothing to absorb it, a tiny mechanical sound can travel in a straight line for an odd distance. "Comms, stand by," I said without touching the PTT, like I needed the air to know as much as they did. Then into the radio. "I'm hearing a sound consistent with a hazard flasher. Bearing northeast-ish. Could be a car down off the track in the drainage cutting." "Copy. Line is still open." Tick heard on our end as well. The call taker's saying the automated voice repeated once and then cut. No human voice. The service track cut left toward a little concrete culvert with the kind of handrail you see on older works' galvanized pipe scuffed by time. The cane here leaned in, a slow wave of green tuned to a frequency you feel in your mouth rather than hear. The tick was clearer at the culvert. I stood and listened, torch off, eyes open in that way you can when the dark makes a room of the world instead of a void. Something about the tick wasn't right. It doubled itself. On. Off. On. On. Off. Like two cars out of step but never quite overlapping. It's funny how such ordinary deeply noises can make your mind go sideways. I pictured a car with hazards on, parked nose into the cane, the sound bouncing off the culvert, the rail, the gate, and coming back to me in pieces. Or two cars. Or a trick of echo. That's all. I dropped down into the drainage easement, boots sliding a little on the dry grass, and drew a neat rectangle with my torch beam fence post, culvert mouth, Regrowth saplings. No car. No smashed fence. No disturbed cane footpath. No smell of coolant, hot rubber, or the other things that tell you quickly whether you're too late or just early. Just to be sure, I climbed the other bank and parted the first meter or two of cane with my forearm. The leaves rasped my sleeve. It's dense stuff. If someone had pushed a vehicle in, there would be a punctuation mark, broken stalks, a trail, something. Comms, I said. No visuals. Sound present. I'm going to walk the cut up to the next grid. Copy. AML dot just drifted south by 20. Now it's east by 10. Not reliable. And Alpha 4-5. The call taker's reporting hearing footsteps. We haven't patched you to the line. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd held. Could be mine carrying. It's open country. Understood. I worked along the drainage, moving slow enough that the map of the place formed in the way it does when you've got time where the ground dips, where the horizon slides against the cane tops, where a single light from a farmhouse on a far ridge flicks and steadies. The tick was steady enough to count. The mind likes patterns. I caught myself counting. 1, 2. Pause. 1, 2. Someone's hazard switch. With a not quite healthy relay. At the second grid, one of those steel cattle grids wider than a ute is long, I stood in the middle and got the sound exactly lined up in front of me, as if the grid were a tuning fork. I played the torch up and left and right. Old tire marks showed as dark lines in the dust, but they were weathered to their faintest self, like the ghost of a track rather than anything fresh. The cane to my right shivered in a pattern that matched no wind I could feel. Comms, can you send me the last 4 AML updates? I asked. They did. The coordinates landed in a rough line that didn't care about the cuttings and channels and boundaries on the map, just a simple geometry like someone had dragged a finger in a straight path across a screen. The last one was plotted 20 meters past the culvert I'd already checked, and 10 meters inside the cane where no road went. QAS are asking for ETA, Comms added. Professional and patient. Negative on scene confirm, I said. No patient, no vehicle. If they want to roll one slow in, I won't be upset. But we may be in ghost call territory. They knew the phrase. 000 and the carriers and the handset makers had all circulated notes. Watch for false positives. Trust your eyes. Don't stand in a ditch looking for a car that isn't. I trust equipment. I also trust the way a place can make you question simple things, like whether a sound is where you hear it. I went back to the culvert because that was the spot where the tick got fullest. The cane at the edge had a little wedge where pig hunters push in sometimes. I shone the torch down the line of bent leaves. The beam dyed in green like a spoon into jelly. I wouldn't get far without a machete. I said out loud what I would write later. No safe access into cane. No obvious signs of crash. No debris. Alpha 4-5, Comm said. Stand by for a moment. The call just 2. Okay. The timer just jumped forward. It was at 12 minutes. It's now showing 29 and counting. We didn't miss audio. It just did that. The line's still open with tick present. The tick is now not in step. It's doubled. I didn't answer for a second. I was thinking about what the ticking actually is in a car the flasher relay energizing. An old school bit of kit that makes noise because it's physical. In newer cars, there isn't a relay. The sound is simulated through the speakers. There's nothing to echo. It's generated. Which made my mind do another little fold. Copy, I said finally. I'm going to climb the bank and check the rail corridor again. Then I might head up to the next road access and come back down the other side. The climb put me level with the cane tops. Out here, its height is a measure of time, how far we're into the season. Not high yet. Enough to make a world. I stood with the rail at my feet, the culvert just to the left, the sound of the tick welling and thinning like a heart that couldn't quite make up its mind. Curlews threw their voices across the flats. Somewhere back toward the highway, a truck geared down and took a corner. All the while, the tick said what it had to say at its own speed. I took 2 steps toward the rail and my boot scuffed something small and plastic in the grass. I played the torch down and lifted it with gloved fingers. A green reflector cap off a bicycle spoke, old and cracked. Could have fallen from anywhere, any time in the last year. The way you find things in the dark, they feel more important than they are. Comms, I said. Do we have any previous calls here, anything logged about a crash in the last 6 months? Any cross or roadside markers in the vicinity? Stand by. More seconds. Nothing recorded at that exact coordinate. A single vehicle RTC about 1 kilometer north 2 years ago. At the bend by the windbreak. No injuries logged beyond minor. No roadside markers in the database. I nodded to no one and kept moving. When I reached the rise after the culvert, I looked back the way I'd come. My torch had left a memory on my retina, a bright rectangle suspended in the air where the concrete had been. The tick seemed to come from the middle of that empty rectangle. I shut my torch off and let my eyes get the dark back. The tick stayed. With no beam to anchor my attention, it was easier to believe that it was coming from just in front of me and just behind me at the same time. The radio gave a small, almost apologetic pop. Alpha 4, 5. I don't want to muddy the waters, but the call taker just heard the beginning of our own script come back on the line. Emergency police, fire, or ambulance. That's our phrasing. We didn't say it. We're still connected to the same call. Timer is now at 31. It did the jump again. I took my thumb off the PTT and put it back. Copy, I said, and that was all. You can think about it to death later. On scene, you don't chase phantoms. You look where a person would be if they needed you. You check the ditch. You check the trees. You check your own impulse to find meaning in coincidence. I cut back to the car, moved up the road 200 meters, and went in through another gap in the fence where the rail corridor widened. The tick got fainter and then went silent. The sudden absence was not a relief. It was like someone had turned off the room. I stopped walking without meaning to, and listened. The night rushed back in. Tree frogs, distant dogs, the little plastic click of a gecko. My own breath, louder than I like. Comms? I said. Alpha 4, 5, the line has just disconnected. No end tone. Timer froze at 31:52, and the record closed itself. I can get telco to mark it for investigation. QAS are asking if they can stand down. Affirmative. No patient. No vehicle. I'm going to do one more loop, and then I'll clear. I did the loop anyway. It wasn't for a report. It was for me. I walked back past the culvert where the concrete remembered my torch, listened for the tick and heard nothing, and caught myself almost wishing it back so the world would make sense the way it had 5 minutes earlier. That's a funny thing to admit. On the way out, I closed the gate, realigned the chain in the first notch, felt the night pressing down in a way that didn't feel unfriendly, just thorough. There are places that know how to be themselves so completely that your presence doesn't ripple them. The cane will shiver whether you're there or not. The curlew will call. The rail will wait a season before it works again. You're an event in a place that measures time in longer units. Back in the car, I let the A divided by C fight the wet air and watched the cane tops with the bar light off. I told comms I was clearing. They told me telco had already replied. The call had entered the system through an aggregator marked as an Apple crash event. The first few seconds had a digital artifact, so the recording didn't register cleanly. The timer jumps were a known issue in rare cases when the call taker uses certain functions. The tick could be telemetry, a watch app, interference. The AML drift was consistent with poor line of sight. They said all this calmly because it's their job to put the world into boxes that make sense so we can carry on to the next thing. I believed them. They were solid reasons. A week later, on day shift, I drove that way for an entirely ordinary reason and saw a little wooden cross back off the road in the grass near the culvert. It wasn't new. I'd missed it in the dark. No dates, just a name drawn in careful pen and a small stone set on the base. Could have been anyone's marker for anything, a place to stop and breathe. I didn't make more of it than I should have. I pulled over, stood for a minute with the engine off, and listened to the daytime version of Night the Mill clanking in the distance, a harvest crew somewhere, shouting to each other over engines, a crow doing its rusty hinge sound in a tree. The culvert sat the way it had sat the week before. The rail didn't remember me. We get a little parcel of hours each day with our name on it and a list of jobs, and then we go home and someone else takes the same roads and has the same conversations. I've had 2 more crash detection calls since. One was a phone dropped by a jogger. He waved at me with both hands like he had to prove he was alive. The other was a motorist on the Bruce, with an actual off, airbag and all. That one ended the way you want, with QAS loading a very surprised, very sheepish man who couldn't quite believe the phone had called for him. Still, sometimes on the back roads when the radio goes quiet, I find my ear pricking for that pointless, ordinary tick that doesn't belong in a paddock, the sound of a machine doing what it thinks is right, in a place that doesn't need it. And I think about a call that came from a device that shouldn't have been where the map said it was, about a timer that jumped forward and froze, as if it wasn't sure which night it belonged to. The cane rustles, the curlew calls, the gate sits with its chain in the first notch, and the rails wait for the season. Something happened, or nothing did. We cleared it and carried on. But in my head, out there by the culvert, I can still hear a tick that never quite lines up with itself, and the dark holding its breath to listen. Story number 4. I work motorway patrol in the north, the stretch of Autobahn that runs between fields that look endless in the day and like a dark sea at night. We call dispatch the Leitstelle. We call an incident an Einsatz. You work it like any other. Slow down. Think. Don't get hit. The road is the most honest thing I know. It tells you what happened with small scuffs and long arcs, if you listen properly. That night was late autumn and wet. Spray hung in the air and made every headlight smear. The Larmschutzwand, the noise barriers, held the sound of trucks bouncing back at us like a low tide that never recedes. My partner and I had done the usual, stopped a van with its rear doors flapping, shifted a pallet off an on-ramp, checked on a car with steam that turned out to be a spilled radiator. We were rolling south, quiet in the cabin, except for the wipers and the chime that reminds you when the edge lamps are on, when the Leitstelle called our Funkruf name. Peter 31, Leitstelle. Silent Notruf via 110. Caller ID shows Notrufsäule Number 23 bis 17. BAB Kilometrierung 214. Right shoulder. Fahrtrichtung Nord. No speech. Line open. Wind noise. Can you divert? I looked over at my colleague. He raised a hand. Why not? Leitstelle? Peter. 30. 1 Nimmt, I said. We're 6 minutes out. Any further? If there is a vehicle down the Boschung, we don't have a visual. 2 previous passes on the traffic cameras show nothing. The call taker hears a repeating tone every couple of seconds. Not a siren. Possibly a relay. RTW and Autobahnmeisterei on standby at Ausfahrt 44. The old orange emergency call boxes Notrufsäulen are fewer than they used to be. But the database in CAD still knows their positions, their IDs, as if they're people with birthdays. Not every call box still connects. Some were removed when they widened sections for an extra lane. Sometimes we still get a call flagged from one, and it turns out to be a mobile phone pinging in roughly the same place. This one had a clean ID, like the box itself had picked up and pressed its own button. We took the next exit and came up the on-ramp facing the direction of travel we needed, the blue signs reflecting back white like snow. The spray made everyone cautious. Our matrix sign went on Nebel, for fog earlier, and the dash filled with a soft light. I felt the stillness you get just before you stop a Streifenwagen on a live highway, the calculation of where to stand, so you have an exit that isn't a railing and a prayer. Let's take the Pannenbucht before 214, my partner said. He knows the kilometer markers the way some people know bus routes. I eased us into the rumble strip, indicators ticking a reassuring metronome, then into the bay. We wore Warnwesten, because you always do, and we stepped out into air that smelled of wet rubber. The Leitpfosten, the white posts, were little lighthouses in a line. The kilometer board said 214, 0. The ground sloped away beyond the guardrail into a strip of rough grass and a drainage ditch. The noise was a low-throated, endless thing. Trucks in convoy with space between them that made the silence thump when it came. Leitstelle, we're on scene, I said, voice flat on purpose. We'll check the shoulder and Boschung. Can you confirm the Notrufsäule number again? 2317, she said. We're getting that repeating tone again. It's close to the microphone. And Peter 31, for your awareness, the database shows that call box decommissioned 3 years ago with the Ausbau. Copy, I said, more to have the word than because it added anything. The orange call boxes used to stand every couple of kilometers, beacons with a door you pulled and a handset that spoke directly to help. Sometimes you can still see where one was concrete plinth left behind, a stump of conduit like a bone sticking out of the earth. We played our torches along the barrier and into the grass. There were no scuff marks on the shoulder, no fresh break in the guardrail, no bits of plastic or glass that catch a beam and shout about recent trouble. Down the slope, the grass was heavy with water and bent in 100 random directions, none of them like a path. And then I heard it. Tick. Pause. Tick. Not our indicators. The car was off behind us, and the sound was not from our left. It felt like it came from just in front of the barrier, at the height of your waist if you were standing there with a thumb on a switch. "Do you have that?" I asked my partner. He lifted his chin. "Yeah," he said. "Hazards." He glanced at the road and back again. "But where?" I leaned over the guardrail, my boots a little too close to the white line for my taste, rain needles on my cheeks, and listened the way you do in a forest at night when you think the next step might mean you find what you came for. Tick. Pause. Tick. The spray on the air made my light into a milk bottle. The sound didn't change when trucks passed, which made no sense. If it came from a vehicle, the rush should flatten it. It sounded like a thing that was only attached to itself. "Light still," I said into the air. We hear a repeating mechanical tick consistent with a hazard relay. No visual. "Do you still have the open line?" "Affirmative," she said, voice a trace softer, as if we were in a library together. The call taker reports a system voice came on the line and said, "Bitte bleiben Sie am Apparat," and then cut. That's our prompt. We did not send it. Timer shows 9 minutes elapsed. That sentence sits with you in a way you don't plan. Please stay on the line. The disembodied courtesy of it. We stepped over the barrier and down the slope. Me first. My partner 3 meters to my right, so if one of us slipped, the other could laugh and then help. The ditch had water in it. Slow as oil in this weather. No shine, just black. Our beams didn't find the rectangle of a bumper, the arc of a wheel, the math of a car where there should be only geometry of earth. At the base of the slope, half hidden in reeds, a square of concrete sat at a tilt. I cleared it with the toe of my boot. It was the size of a paving stone with 4 anchor bolts in the corners. Nothing installed on it. Rust marking where something had once been. A little orange rectangle of paint remained, faded out like a memory. I scraped mud off the edge with a glove and felt the conduit tube. Empty, the cable long since pulled. "Found the plinth," I said. "No column." The tick went on, quite indifferent to my discovery. On, off, on, off. Not rushed. Patient. It didn't get louder or quieter whether I was over the plinth or 2 meters away. That was the bit that made my scalp want to step aside. If it were from a car somewhere off the shoulder, it ought to get stronger when I faced the right direction. Here it was like a watch worn by the night itself, the sound near no matter where I stood. A trucker had pulled into the bay behind our car. He left his hazards on a proper, visible pair of orange blinks that made my pupils narrow. He walked up with his collar up and his cap pulled down, and asked in a way you can barely hear over the road noise if we needed cones. I told him we were okay, asked if he'd seen anything up ahead. He said only that he'd noticed the phone light flicker. I looked at the empty plinth and wondered what he thought he'd seen. Some people remember things that aren't there because they were once. He wished us a safe shift and went back to his cab. His hazards, close and physical and obedient, made the other tick seem like something else entirely. My partner scanned the Boschung with the Wärmebild camera we keep for nights like this. The world went black and white, and then black and white reversed. The heat of the engine in our car was a bright square. The road was a smeared ribbon. The grass was gray. No person, no animal, no engine cooling unseen below us appeared as a glow. The tick went on. "Lightstell," I asked, "do we have any previous at this marker? Any unusual calls flagged to this?" "Notrufsaule ID? Stand by," she said. I could hear her keyboard in my ear like rain. 2 incidents here during works both years ago. 1 broken down car, 1 debris. No associated silent calls. The Notrufsoil number is still in the database, but with status Außer Betrieb. The telecommunications provider says, no line is present. Copy. I shone my torch across the ditch one more time and saw the way the water took the light and wore it like silk for a second before letting it go. We climbed back over the barrier because that's where we ought to be to not die under a lorry. We stood long enough to feel absurd, and then not absurd again. Sometimes the job is standing in a place until a feeling passes. Then the light still came back. Careful. Peter 31. The timer on the call just jumped from 11 to 19 minutes. No audio change. Still the wind. Still the tick. The call taker reports hearing how to say our own voice prompt as if from a distance. We did not play it. My partner looked at me and raised his shoulders. He's not a superstitious man. He knows engines and people and the weather of roads. Echo, he said. And then, because the night hadn't given us the courtesy of something ordinary to write down, he added, technic failure. We walked the shoulder up to 214, 2 and back to 213, 8. If something had left the road, we would have seen the story. A track through the wet grass, a dent in the barrier, a plastic lens from a taillight sitting like a small red coin. There was nothing. The only sign with any opinion was a little plastic triangle someone had set neatly against the barrier 20 meters back. The kind drivers put behind them when they're stopped. It was clean, as if recently placed, but dry in a way that suggested it had missed the rain. The road does these to you details that offer themselves, and then turn to mist. We set it upright. It fell over like it preferred that. RTW and Meisterei? I asked the radio. They can stand by in place. There's nothing for them to work. We'll remain 5 more. Understood, came back. And the call just disconnected. No end tone. The timer froze at 19 and 32. Then the record closed. We'll mark it with the provider. The tick did not stop. Our indicators ticked when I unlocked the car to get the long flashlight. They ran in time and then fell out of time with the other tick. And the double made a private dread that I felt silly for naming. The other tick belonged to nothing I could point to. It was not louder near the plinth. It was no quieter 100 meters away. It sat in the air like a thought you can't place. We cleared because that's what you do when there's nothing to hold you. The Lightstell logged, Own Feststellingen, and we rolled north 1 exit and came back, just to be the kind of thorough that helps you sleep. On the far side, the scene looked like its mirror. Barrier, Buschung, water with its slow pour. A small square of concrete with anchor bolts, where a twin call box had once lived. The tick was not there. It was only at the first bay, as if that stretch of air had a metronome. In the morning, daylight made the place honest. I drove by again on a day shift with the sun high enough to burn the spray off, and the fields beyond the barriers visible in patches sugar beets that looked like wet stones in rows, a tractor moving like a memory ship. The plinth was a piece of concrete and nothing more under a small scrub plant. The little triangle we'd set upright was on its side again. That stubborn thing's hobby, no tick. The road does not perform in day clothes. The telecommunications company wrote to the Lightstell that week. The call had come through with the identity of the decommissioned call box because of a mapping issue at the interface between systems. No line existed at the physical site. The prompt heard was likely an upstream test phrase leaked. The timer jump was a known bug when the call taker used a function to check another line. Everything they said was solid and kind to the nerves. The Autobahnmeisterei added that the last physical Notruf soil was removed during Ausbau, the cables pulled back and capped. They sent a photo of the work from 3 years ago. A man in orange with a wrench, gray sky, the empty plinth left like a missing tooth. 2 months later, we got the same call flag in the same place. Same wind noise, same tick, different shift. The team that took it stood in the rain and reported, no Feststellingen. The tick had been present, they wrote, but could not be located even with the barrier acting as a reflector. One of them added, in a line that made me smile without wanting to, road felt attentive. That's not a police word, but I knew what he meant. Sometimes a place seems to lean toward you. I don't build altars to these things. I keep my high-vis where I can grab it without looking. I park with my wheels straight in case I have to jump in and go. I treat a silent call like a person's breath behind a wall. Most of them are misdials and signal failures and a night getting into the wires. Every now and then a call takes you to a piece of concrete in the rain and asks you to listen to a sound you can't hold in your hand, and you stand there for 5 minutes longer than you needed to because you think if you understand the music of the place, you'll find what you're meant to find. Sometimes at 3 in the morning, with the wipers working and the radio resting, I'll pass 214 and, without meaning to, lower the window a crack. The air smells like wet metal in distance. I don't hear the tick. If I imagine it, it's not because of the road, it's because I remember standing with my boots in the grass, feeling watched not by a person, but by kilometers of tarmac that have seen more nights than I will. We log it. We drive on. The road forgets us first. We forget it later. Story number 5. I work nights out of a station on the East Rand, Gauteng. We share a boundary with a lot of townhouse complexes, some older freestands, and then, just past the last robot, patches of veld that look like dark ocean at 2 in the morning. If you don't live here, you don't understand the sound of it at night. Electric fences ticking their heartbeat, a generator somewhere grumbling because of load, shedding, distant dogs talking to one another across streets, and the wind dragging itself through jacaranda trees like fabric. We run a sector van, 2 up if we're lucky. I've got years in, but on the job you still get nights that make you feel like a rookie, not because they're dramatic, but because they don't give you anything to hold. It was winter, that thin, dry cold that sneaks through your uniform. Stage 4 on the schedule. Lights out in our sector from 0 to 2:30. The sky over the city was still a gray dome where the power stayed on, but in our grid, it was black enough to see the Milky Way if you leaned your head back. My partner was on the MDT checking an old docket, and I was letting the heater find my knees when control came up on channel. Sector Charlie, 110111. Silent panic activation from a fixed line. Multiple hits. Same address. Caller ID matches Telcom landline for Unit 12. Waterville Villas. Access off Duiker Street. Open line. No speech. Private security is also on response. Panic activations don't usually go to us first. They go to whichever security company your monthly debit order feeds. Half the complexes have armed response sitting outside in a little Golf. The other half buy themselves a board that says, "Alarm armed," and hope a board works as good as a body. But 10111 gets the ones that go straight to the national route, or when the security companies can't get eyes. We treat them like a live thing until we know they're not. Charlie. 1 copies, I said. We're en route. Any further? Line has been open 3 minutes, Control said. We're hearing a fast triple tone every few seconds. Not a siren. Sounds like a keypad. There's power outage reported in that area. No answer on callback. We swung into Duiker. With load shedding, every second driveway has inverters keeping the lounge lights on, and every other house is a dark cutout with a blue alarm LED, the only eye. Waterville Villas sits behind a wall with a sliding gate and a guardhouse. In the day, there's a woman who knits and keeps a ledger in perfect handwriting. At night, it's a man in a jacket with reflective strips and a flask that smells like rooibos. That night, the guardhouse was a square lit by battery lantern. The electric gate was open, propped with a brick, because the motor's battery had given up hours ago. We rolled in slow, hazards on low just so the guard didn't shoot out of his chair. A Fidelity Backy sat skewed in the visitor's bay, bonnet glinting. The guard stepped out, hand up. "You? For 12? He asked, and when I nodded, he added, "Alarm's been going mad. Private's just ahead of you." Unit 12 was mid-row, face brick, a little garden with 2 succulents doing their best. The light above the door was off. The private security guy was already at the stoop. Sweat on his upper lip from a jog up the stairs, the FAL on a sling tight to his chest. He gave me a nod like we'd been here 1,000 times. We had, just not to this exact door. "Got multiple panics from inside," he whispered out of reflex, even though whispering didn't change anything. "Control can't reach the phone. Battery's dying on the alarm panel, so it's chirping. Neighbor says they heard nothing. Gates open because of the load shedding. I didn't want to force entry without you." I stood at the door and listened. There it was, a bright, anxious chirp every so often, then 3 quick beeps like taps on glass alarm panel language. The kind of sound a house makes when it's been left alone and is trying to call for attention the only way it knows. The chirp had a tail to it, like it belonged to a different room. My partner stood to the side, torch low, and I knocked. "South African Police Service," I called. "If you called us, please open. Or bang on the door if you can't speak." The words are so worn, they say themselves. Inside, nothing moved. No feet, no voice, no dog, no television muffled under a blanket. Just the chirp and then the panel's 3-beep complaint. I put my palm to the wood. Cold. You can feel when a house is holding its breath. Control came up again. Quiet. "Charlie. 1. Be advised the 10111 line is still open. We can hear a chirp that matches what you're describing, and we also heard Police, open up on the line, but it didn't route through your radio. Did you say that, member? Yes, I said, eyes on the guard's face, his head tilted, listening with us. You're hearing it on the caller's side? Affirmative. Timer shows 7 minutes. We've tried to call the landline. Permanent engaged. Line testing shows in service. I looked at the security guy. You got a contact for the owner? He checked his phone. Subscriber. Mr. L. I've got a cell phone. I've called it twice. Rings, no answer. No other contacts on file. This unit's just sold, according to the guard. Old tenant moved out last week. The guard coughed softly. They moved on Saturday, he said. House is empty. Only the alarm box is there because the new people must still sign. Maybe the wind pushed the panic. He said it like it could happen. And maybe it can. If the fingers of the world find the right buttons. We gave it one more minute at the door, because sometimes that's all someone needs to know you're not going to kick their life in. Then I made the decision you make a dozen times in a career. Force entry to save life, or walk away and sleep badly. The chirp, the 3 beep, the line open and refusing to clear, the empty house that wasn't yet anyone's none of it made the tick you need to push. But I had that second-person feeling, like a room had turned its face to me. I nodded at the private, and he stepped back. We used a pry on the gate first, then the door. The latch gave easier than it should have, because the striker plate screws had always been too short. We announced again and stepped in. The air inside had that dry, dusty smell of carpets that have been taken, but the shadow where they were left behind still lingers. Boxes, bare walls, a paper taped to the kitchen cupboard with "Please read," and the alarm company's number in thick marker. On the wall by the front door, the alarm keypad blinked a small red AC fail, and a series of beeps went in a pattern that made sense to itself. 3 quick. Pause. 1 long. Pause. The siren hadn't tripped. It was a house sighing to itself. We did a sweep the way you learn to do it politely. Bedroom. Cupboards. Bathroom. Back door bolted. Nothing in the ensuite but the echo of our torch against tile. The only thing that made any sound was the panel, and the odd outside noises that homes inhale through vents. The tick of an electric fence energizer pulsing somewhere on the boundary, a generator, a street away muffled by walls, the little plastic click of a fridge that had no power but was cooling itself in the absence of work. No person, no sign of a fight, no glass, no propped up chair under a door handle, no other story. In the kitchen, I found the landline phone base station sitting on the counter, no handset. The line cord was in. The little screen was dead, probably also starved of current, but the line was physically connected. I picked up the cord with a gloved hand and held it between finger and thumb, like a wire can tell you anything by the way it hangs. Control, I said. We're inside. House is empty, looks recently vacated. Alarm panel shows power fail. We've got an open one, 0111 line, but there's no handset here, unless it's ringing from a jack. Can Telcom see if there's another instrument? Stand by, Control said. Their voice had that careful flatness that keeps you from reading into the spaces. Telcom confirms 1 physical line, 1 number. They show line in service. No other instruments registered. And, okay, the timer on the 10111 call just jumped forward. It was at 9. It now shows 21. Audio unchanged. We also heard, faintly, what sounded like a door knock. That might be you. It was, I said. My partner gave me a look that said, "We're chasing ghosts, Brew." He's a practical man. He believes in the ways houses settle, and the ways systems cough. We checked the garage empty except for a patch of oil where someone used to park, and the little courtyard where a laundry line hung 2 clothes pegs, companionably useless. Back inside, at the keypad, I pressed star to see the zone fault list. The panel gave me its thoughts. Zone 1, front door. Zone 6, panic, power, fail. There it was. Panic had been activated. You can trigger panic on these with a keypad combination, or with a button under the counter, or a little pendant if you bought the package. No pendant here, no under counter. A keypad could be fat-fingered, sure, but it had happened more than once tonight if the call taker saw multiple hits. and my mind went to that other line that wasn't to us, the one that had to be patched onward by the alarm company to 10111. The private security guy murmured into his mic and then turned his head. "Control says they only got the signal once," he said. Then the panel went into comms fail. But the 10111 side kept pinging. My tech says old panels sometimes default a phone line to keep sending. Maybe it latched. "Copy," I said. It fit enough to carry on. We did a courtesy call to the neighbor on one side, a man with a headlamp who looked at us like he'd just remembered dreams he hadn't had. "No, officer," he said. "I didn't hear shouting or glass. The alarm jaw, but you get used to it. I'm on backup power. My inverter makes a funny hum sometimes. Do you want me to call the trustee? He'll complain about the place being open." We resecured the front door as best we could with a long screw the private had in his pocket, the sort of fix that would make a carpenter spit, but it holds a night together. I wrote a note with our case number and tucked it into the little gap in the frame. Then we stepped outside and into the cold again. "Charlie, 1, Control said. The line just disconnected. No end tone." Timer froze at 21:58. Record closed. "Telcom will mark for investigation." "Copy," I said. I looked at the guard. He looked back at me like he was waiting to hear the story I had made of this. "Empty house," I said. "Alarm panels starving. We've resecured. Tell the trustee to get the new owner to sort their alarms, nah? And get that motor battery on a charge." He nodded, wrote it into his ledger, which would outlive us all. We climbed back into the van, the heater catching at the windshield, and for a moment the world became small, just the two of us and the square of light thrown by the dash. Then the radio again, softer. "Charlie, 1, sorry to call you back, but 10111. Just received another silent panic from the same line. Open for 6 seconds. Drops. Then another. 3 in a row. No audio on our side now. Just the tone the panel sends when it dials. You're still on scene?" We were. We walked back up. No new sounds. The panel still wrung its hands in beeps, then settled, like an anxious cousin who apologizes after apologizing. The private security control came up on his earpiece. He shared what he heard. "We're seeing dial attempts too. But the line is weird. Our receiver says it's not getting proper handshake. Your side is hearing the open carrier maybe." The language was familiar enough that it grounded me. Handshakes, carriers, timers, systems trying to talk and failing. On my end, though, there was the strange, small fact of the house. The way the echo sounded in the passage, the way the line remained open when nothing in it had power to be open, the way my "police open up" had slipped sideways onto a line it shouldn't have been on. We cleared again because we had to. The calls stopped for the rest of the shift. We made 2 other jobs, a drunk driver who was also a man trying his best to not tell his wife some news, and a break-in where the suspect had left with a TV and nothing else. The usual. At about 4, when the power came back like a tide rolling into the grid, Control sent me a message. Telcom had already looked at the exchange. Their note. The line in question was still feeding an alarm and call device on the premises. The repeated dial-outs were likely due to power cycling during the outage. The timer irregularity was a recording artifact. If we had any further incidents, please refer to the provider. It was neat. It made sense. We went off shift at 6. I went home and listened to my own house switch from dark to day, the geyser's little click. The fridge's hum coming back like a breath. The birds starting up. I slept like a person who hadn't earned it but was going to take it anyway. 2 days later, day shift this time, I took a statement at Waterval Villas for an unrelated matter and walked past Unit 12. A man in paint-splattered overalls had put the door on its back and was sanding the frame, fine white grit rising in the cold sun like smoke. A new panel sat in a box on the stoop, brand name on it that I'd seen on half the gate booms in the neighborhood. The trustee was there too, pointing with a pen. "We must keep the gateway closed," he said to the air, which included me. "When the power is down, it must be locked." He looked at me as if the night version of me had been a different person who could have done more to hold the day together. I nodded, wrote our case number down for him again, and moved on. I keep thinking about the sound of the house that night, the little thrice beep that repeats itself, because that's the language it has, the way the open line carried my voice back to me from a direction it shouldn't have. We get used to alarms like white noise, We get used to load shedding, making a world of battery lanterns and improvised solutions. And still, every now and then, a call insists in a way that makes the hairs on your arm bother themselves, not because there's a man with a knife in the kitchen, but because there's nothing, and the nothing is loud. If you drive past there late, you can hear 100 panels in 100 complexes chirp as the power dips or returns. They're the tiny electronics of a city negotiating with itself. Sometimes, when the radio is quiet, and the heater finds my knees, and the jacaranda leaves scratch at each other above the van, I find my ear looking for that 3-beep sequence that didn't belong to the night as much as it belonged to a logic panel on a wall. I know the solid reasons. They're enough to do the paperwork and to get on to the next job. But in my head, there's still a little room made of bare walls and a blinking red LED, and a line that stayed open longer than it should, as if a place designed to complain softly for help did exactly that and didn't know how to stop. Story number 6. I'm assigned to a small koban on the edge of a river town in Honshu, the kind of place that goes to sleep properly after the last train. Nights here have their own rhythm. You can tell the time by the sounds. The recycling truck clinking bottles at 9, the municipal chime at 5 in the afternoon that plays Yuyaki Koyaki across the loudspeakers on the poles, and then later, the world drops into the quiet between vending machines. It's never silent. The vending machines hum like little shrines. A bicycle chain clicks through the underpass. The river works on itself under the levee, and somewhere a night heron makes a sound like someone stepping on a floorboard in a house you don't live in. We run lean on nights 2 cars for our sector if we're lucky, and the nearest backup a long few minutes if they happen to be pulled to the other side of the bypass. It was early autumn. The rice paddies had just turned from green to that expensive gold, stubble flattening under a wind from the mountain. I'd done my patrol loop shrine, station, back along the flood wall and was parked behind the koban, writing up a bicycle recovery, when command lit up my handset. Unit 2, 1, command. We have an open 110. No speech. Line remains. Location data puts the origin near the Kawase levee, municipal speaker pole number 7, close to the old public phone pad. Ping is moving a little but staying within 20 meters. Can you attend? 2, 1 copies. Any further on background? Call taker reports steady wind noise. Occasional tone, single bell-like chime every minute. No voice. Callback returns immediately to open carrier. No registered subscriber. Line ID comes back to a public instrument. A public instrument. That made the hairs on my arm lift because I knew that stretch of levee. There used to be a green box phone by the slope, back when high school kids still queued to call home in the rain. It was removed last year when they refurbished the walkway, and the River Authority put up the new floodboards with the engineering dates on them. The pedestal bolts were there in the concrete like a scar, but the phone was a memory. I told command I was en route, and eased the car out onto the main road. The town is clean-edged at night. The shutters are down on the ramen place. The pachinko parlor is a lit aquarium, and then a dark one when they close, and the crosswalk beeps go silent after 10. I turned off at the river road, the light from the dash settling into that kind of company you get only when it's just you and your breathing and the screen glow. The levee is a long, patient thing. You can feel the river behind it even when you can't hear it. A strip of asphalt runs along the top with metal poles every 40 meters holding the municipal speakers, the ones that play music at 5 in the afternoon, and the earthquake alerts the rest of the time. They're ugly in the day, and they disappear at night until they speak. The old public phone pad sits at the base of the slope by a little flight of steps with a bicycle rail. An old map board nearby shows the evacuation route with arrows that don't mean much until they do. I killed my headlights before the last corner and rolled up slow with only the parking lamps. The fog off the river sat at shin height, moving like breath. When I opened the door, the night stepped in and brought the smell of wet concrete and autumn. I stood and listened because that's the first thing we do when there's nothing obvious to look at. Command, 2, 1 on scene, I said. No vehicles on the levee. I'll walk in. The first thing I noticed wasn't the chime. It was the absence of the crickets for a narrow piece of the path. The insects were there in the grass down the slope like always, but at the top, by the steps, the sound was thinner, as if someone had put their hand over the world. I moved toward the municipal speaker pole with the number 7 tag screwed into it. My torch picked up reflective paint on the inspection door 3 meters up, the padlock ring stained with rust like a tear. Then I heard it, a single, polite ding from somewhere up the path, almost like the top note on the municipal chime, the one that comes before an announcement. Ding. Then a long pause, the night filling back in, then ding. It wasn't a bike bell. It was the frequency and timbre of the city's speaker system when they tested, except nobody tests it at 2 in the morning. Command. I have a repeating single chime audible at the levee. Not a bicycle bell sounds like the municipal system pre-tone. Any alerts scheduled? Negative, Command said. No test scheduled. The call taker reports hearing the same tone on the open 110 line at approximately 60-second intervals. Timer shows 5 minutes. No voice. Caller ID still returning the old public phone ID. The old public phone ID. I looked down at the concrete at my feet. 4 bolts in a square where the green box used to be. A little clean island on the pad where the base had shielded it from sun and rain made a ghost of the phone. I put my hand over it without thinking. Gloved palm flat to the cold. The concrete held its temperature like a thought. I told myself the chime was probably coming from one of the neighborhood speakers further along the levee, but echoing. Still, I looked up the pole's number twice to make sure I was exactly where the map said I was. Pole 7. Old phone pedestal. The river was a strong, slow whisper behind the flood wall. I climbed the steps to the top of the levee and walked along toward pole 8, then 9. The fog lay in stripes across the path, like someone had pulled a comb through it. The ding came again. Not closer, not farther. It seemed attached to the levee rather than a point on it. I could feel my shoulders up a little too high and made myself drop them. Command, can you confirm the call is still up? I asked. And can you tell me if any other units are close? Call still up, the operator said. No other units in immediate vicinity. 2. 5 is 10 minutes out if requested. Also stand by. We just heard 110. What is your emergency? On the open line. It sounded like our own prompt, faint, as if from a speaker. We did not play it. Timer now shows 11 minutes. No disconnect tone. I stopped at pole 9, turned, and looked back at where the phone pad sat by the steps. The ding came like it had grown out of the mist, and I had that small, ridiculous thought that didn't help me. If I stood still, and all the sounds slid off me, would I be able to hear what the levee would say if it spoke? I've cleared bars where chairs were still warm, and houses where the fridge hum was louder than church bells. This was different. This felt like a place that had plenty to say, but not to me. A bicycle light came slowly along the opposite bank, a little red dot moving steady, the rider a black cutout against the night sky. I wanted to wave in case they wondered what a police car was doing half off the road with its parking lamps on at river time, but the impulse passed. There are hours where you let other people be ghosts, and they let you. Back at the pad, I crouched and saw that the conduit came out of the concrete and into an underground box with a lid marked NTT. It had 2 screws with heads that had been stripped by more years than either of us had, the plastic crazed by Sunday. I put my hand on it and it was cool. Of course. Whatever was happening somewhere far upstream of a box at my feet. Command, I said. Do we have any old tickets on this location? Any history of silent 110 seconds plotting to the public phone here? Stand by, came the reply. I could see in my mind the screens in the room at headquarters, the long desk with the headsets, the board showing units moving like little sinusoids along hard black lines. We have 2 silent 110 seconds in the last 6 months that plotted to Kawase Levee, neither with this phone ID. Both cleared by attending officers as no trace. The municipal speaker system maintenance was recorded on those days as normal. No alerts. Copy. I stepped down off the pad and turned my torch along the grass at the foot of the slope, just in case someone had rolled down there and was lying between the blades. Nothing. A crumpled drink can that would be moved by the next good rain. A single shoe print that might have been mine from a month ago. The sound of water taking the future apart, 1 grain at a time. The ding came again, and at the same moment command spoke in my ear in the voice we all recognize when something doesn't fit. Unit 2-1. We just heard a knock on the line. It sounded like someone tapping a microphone. Also, and I know this is odd, we heard your call sign, your voice. You did not transmit to us at that moment. I did not, I said, watching my own breath make a thin fog where the other fog lived. I haven't keyed up for 20 seconds. Understood. Timer is now at 12. Then, sorry, at 23. It jumped. We didn't lose audio. It jumped. It was not the first time I'd had a timer jump on an open line, and I know the explanations recording buffer, call taker switching screens, system catching up. They are honest reasons. They don't change the way it feels when the night makes you look over your shoulder at a pole. There's a floodgate near pole 10 with a steel stair and a graded walkway over the sluice. The town has put an underlight there because kids used to take pictures at night leaning over it, and they didn't want a headline that started with the word tragedy. I walked over. My torch made the graded floor into a zebra of dark and light. The river spoke up through the slots, a deeper voice here where the gate narrowed it. The ding came again and rolled across the water like a pebble. My own footsteps sounded like someone else was walking one pace behind me. I stopped. The second footstep stopped half a heartbeat later, because that's what echoes do. I told myself that and believed it, until the belief put its hands in its pockets and stared at its shoes. 2, 1, command said. Telecom is on the line to us. They advise the phone ID we are seeing is mapped to a decommissioned coin phone removed last fiscal year. They say the ID may still be in the database and could be assigned in error to nearby calls. However, they also report the AIS data is showing the line as alive with frequent off-hook events. They can't reconcile. They're sending a note to field. The officers who trained me taught me something that gets me through nights like that. Look for the human in it. If there's no human in it, do the next correct thing, and don't make a story to hold your fear. So I did the human things. I checked the path for someone waiting in the dark. I called out softly, "Police, if you called us, I'm here. Call back to me." Because someone in a ditch might not want to shout, I shone my light under the slanted concrete, where the slope meets the foundation, in case someone had tucked themselves into the only bit of shelter the river gives for a kilometer. Nothing but cobwebs that took the light and made small, bright constellations of dust. Back at the car, I looked at the municipal speaker pole, and because I wanted to get it over with, I stepped close and put my palm against the metal where the inspection door was. It was cold, like everything else. No hum. That would have been too much even for a story I tell myself. "Command," I said. "I'm going to remain for 5 more and then clear as no trace. Can you log Telecom's note, and please mark the municipal speaker maintenance office to check pole 7 inches the morning?" "Logged," they said. The call is still up, timer now at 24. We are again hearing the municipal pre-tone chime. The call taker can't identify the source, but it is clear. We also heard "Sorry, I know you yake koyake" very faint, just the first bars. I looked up at the dark speaker horns pointed over the town, and imagined for a moment the polite, old-fashioned melody drifting at 2 in the morning to an audience of 0. We play that song at 5 to tell the kids to come home, a throwback to a time when people needed a town to keep the time for them. The idea of it coming now, off schedule, made the skin on my forearms tighten, not because the sound is frightening, but because a clock was doing a thing without being told. I didn't hear the song on the levee, I only heard the ding. Command heard the song on the line. That was enough to make me take 2 slow breaths, and remind myself to write what I see, and not what a story would like. 10 minutes became 5, became 3, and then Command said what I knew they would. "Unit 2, 1, the line has disconnected. No end tone." Timer froze at 24:38, record closed. "Telecom will investigate. The municipal office will be notified." "None, time, copy," I said, and stood another minute because sometimes that's the minute that matters. The ding did not come again. The crickets filled the path back in. Somewhere across the water, a fox barked once, like the last sentence of something I hadn't heard the start of. I got in the car, wrote my short notes into the CAD from the MDT in the glow of the screen, and drove the levee slowly enough to feel like I had not left anything behind. In the morning, on day shift, I went by the municipal office to hand them the number of the pole and the time. The man at the counter said, "We had no alarms at that hour," and laughed a little uncomfortably. He wrote it down anyway on a form that had a box for time of irregularity and a box for observed by. He put my name in that second box and looked at it like the paper might have a further question. Telecom sent Command a note later that week. It said the following: "The Open 110 had entered the system with the identity of a decommissioned public coin phone, due to a legacy mapping table not yet purged for that exchange. The upstream audio contained a low-level tone consistent with the municipal speaker system standby ping. The timer irregularity could be the call taker switching screens to check a second line. No faults were found in the municipal network. An inspection maybe reset something incidentally. Everything they wrote would let a supervisor sign off and would let me sleep properly. Honest reasons. Still, at 3 in the morning, when it's just me and the vending machines and the river making its old arguments with the banks, I pass pole 7 sometimes and listen for that one neat ding. It's not frightening. It's not a thing that makes a story except the one I tell myself while I wait for the next call. And I think about how we have built a town that talks to itself in tones and prompts and little songs, and how sometimes those make their way onto a line that should be quiet. Most of the world is solid. Sometimes it isn't. We do the next correct thing. We write it down, and the river goes on. Story number 7. I work nights in a district that's fjord on one side, and low mountain on the other, thin roads that follow the curve of the water like handwriting, a few tunnels that take the bends out at the cost of daylight, and ferry quays that were busy until the new bridges opened. We call dispatch Operation Centralen. You learn their voices as surely as the voices of your own family. On our radio, an incident is a Hendels, a call is a Notenrop, and the quiet between the last bus and the first ferry is a thing with weight. It was February and well below zero. The snow hadn't fallen in a week, but it held its shape in the ditches, a clean geometry cut by the plow in long rolls. Out over the fjord, the sky had that hard glitter. That means the night is set and won't change its mind. If you're lucky, you get a strip of green above the mountain, a pale curtain that never really makes a show. If you're unlucky, you get black on black and the way your own headlights make a room out of the world and leave the rest of it watching. We were 2 up for once. My partner had his gloves off, writing up a theft that had become a misunderstanding, his breath fogging the cabin glass from the inside. Then the radio gave a soft tone, and the OPS controller used the voice we all straightened for. Patrulje 102,3, Operationscentralen. Åpen 102, ingen tale. Amelplotter til det gamle fergeleiet på vestsiden. Kaiområdet. Fastlinje ID returnerer. Nødtelefon. 212. Vindlyd i bakgrunnen. Linje stabil. Ambulansen informat. Ikke utrygget. I thumbed the PTT. 21 Vitar. Any further? Kvitteringer på linja? Opfattet. Calltaker hører periodisk metallisk klang som en kætting mod en mast. Ikke regelmæssig. Ingen menneskestemme. Timer viser 3 minutter. Tilbageringing går ret til åbenbær. Nud Telephone 22 made me picture a little green box on a post with a handset you lift and a directly connected line to help. There used to be one on that quay, and you'd see it lit in winter under the one working floodlight. Kids huddled beneath it to get out of the wind waiting for the ferry. They removed it the year the bridge opened to the north. The pedestal bolts stayed like teeth in gum. We turned off the main road. The snow crackled under the tires where the salt had taken and refrozen. We took the last bend with our blue off and our hazard warning down to steady, not because we expected trouble, but because a key has only so much space, and we didn't need the whole place to know we'd arrived. The ferry ramp was up, chained and locked, the heavy rubber fenders looking like sleeping animals in the spill of our parking lamps. A sign still hung, a leftover, Verja Instilt Bro Open. Someone had drawn a smiley face next to it a summer ago, and the spray of salt had eaten most of the smile. Operationscentralen. 1,000,3 på stedet. Vi checkar kaj och område. Up för tätt, she said, and her voice softened a fraction, the way they do when the night wants you to lower your own volume. Linjen fortsatt öppen. Timer 5. Samma bakgrundslid. Arm visar 15 meters variation längs kajfronten. The air at the water has its own temperature. It bit through my trousers like a dog that knows it won't be punished. The smell was old steel and wet rope as much as brine. Somewhere across the fjord, a snowplow made a long white echo you could see. A slow comet running along the far bank and making no sound inside your head. When I stood still, I heard it. Not a beep, not a chime, but a soft, clumsy clong from somewhere down the quay, as if a chain lifted and then settled on a bollard. Then silence long enough to make me doubt I'd heard it. Then again, the clong. We walked the length of the quay the way you do when you know every step by day, and the darkness makes a stranger of it. The ice on the planks had that black sheen it gets when it's been stepped on and refrozen. There were no fresh boot prints except the guards from earlier in the evening when he'd come to check the lock, he told us later, and ours now. The old terminal building was boarded. A plank across the door with a single rust streak where a nail had learned to cry. The small shed where they used to keep chains and de-icer was padlocked and wore the wind like a shawl. Politi, I called low. A quay carries sound too far if you let it. Was du har ringt oss? Giteng. Bank. I recca. My voice did that thing it does at water. It went out and didn't come back. 21,3, Ope said softly. Vi hører politi. Giteng på 112-linjen. PTT hos deg var ikke aktivert. Timer nå 6. I glanced at my handset. Dead. The little orange light dark. I looked at my partner. He lifted an eyebrow. We've both heard our voices where they shouldn't be before upstream echo. Someone on speakerphone, a recording snippet in the wrong place. The way it crawls under the skin a little never really leaves. At the edge of the quay, set into concrete discolored like an old bruise, was the pedestal where the emergency phone had lived. 4 bolts in a square. A faded outline where the base had kept sun and rain off the concrete just enough to draw a shape of absence. I put my glove down on it without thinking, palm flat, as if a posture could make something feel like it belonged to the present again. Cold. Of course, the clong again. It was more felt than heard, a mechanical heaviness in the air, patient, wrong only in that it was not attached to any obvious thing. A buoy with a bell? We don't hang bells on buoys in that stretch. It's too close to the ferry ramp for anything that sings in the wind. The chain on the raised ramp could move in a gust and knock. Only the air was still enough that our breath seemed the only moving thing above deck height. Operationscentralen. I said, hører samme klong her. Sannsynlig kjettingevind, men vind stille. Ingen kjøretøy. Ingen fotspor ut på isen. Sjekker skur, sjekker kanten. Oppfattet. Calltaker melder systemstemme på linjen et øyeblikk. 112 nødsentralen. Hvilken nødetat? Ikke fra oss. Timer nå 8. We did the human things in the unhuman hour. I took a torch and played the beam along the waterline, careful where I put my boots. The fjord lay like oil, black and flat enough that the light made a pillar down into nothing. No car nose, no line of bubbles, no coat floating where a body would be. The rubber fenders took the beam and ignored it. On the surface, a patch of lighter water moved oddly, a slow circle that could have been anything from a seal to nothing but currents tangling. We have a name for the way a place can make you narrate it, as if that helps. Hendelson, we call it, as if naming makes a box for the unknowable parts. We checked the shed. The lock had that loose play old locks get where they still hold more out of habit than strength. Inside was exactly what should be there. A tub of salt hardened at the corners, 2 coils of chain on pegs, a can of red paint with the lid welded shut by time. The clong came again, and this time my partner and I both looked toward the ramp. The chain on the gate that kept the ramp up was still, its links seated in themselves like fingers sleeping. Får det någon bevegelse i Emil? I asked. Det flyttar sig 2 till 3 meter fram och tillbaka längs kanten, OPS said, som om någon gick. Men ingen varme registrerat av kamera på stedet. Vi har ingen faste kameror på det gamla lejet. Timer. Nonni. We walked to the outer edge of the quay where the last bollard sits. The paint on the number 4 was scabbed. Our boots made a small theater of noises. The sharp of leather on ice, the squeal of fine crystals under weight, the little rubber grunts of our soles. The water said nothing, except the essential thing it says, which is that it would prefer you in it or out of it, but not troubling its skin. Politi, I called again, in case the person the line belonged to was somewhere in the space that sound could fit. Was du ikke kan snakke slå I rekverket. My knuckle against the metal made a dull report that went up my arm and into my chest. A sound you feel more than hear. 21-3. Opes came, and I could hear keys and low voices in the room behind the voice without her needing to tell me she wasn't alone. Call taker melder. Let banklitter. Polingen. Men de forene til at være for dig. Timer nu 11. Og stand ved tiden og 19. Timer hopp. Audio uendre. I don't love the timer jumps. I know the explanations. Call taker puts the line on hold to check something. System doesn't log the elapsed seconds evenly. The record catches up and fills the box. The reason sits fine in daylight. At the edge of a quay in the cold, your body hears knittin' and decides it will store that for later. The sheet of metal that used to hold the emergency phone's instruction card was still bolted to the wall by the terminal building, above the height a child would touch. The card itself was gone, but you could see where the 4 screws had sunk themselves deep in their little homes, halos of rust. Above it, the light over the old pay gate flickered once, as if there were still a circuit here learning a bad habit from the wind. I made a note to myself to get the municipality to cut that power. Nothing needs to be energized at a dead key. As we turned back toward the car, a ferry horn rolled down the fjord from far away, one deep note that makes you feel the scale of the valley, not from our quay, from the route still running around the headland. It was so ordinary that it steadied me, a sound you expect in a life where things run and stop on time. It stopped the clong for a breath. My mind made them connected because that's what minds do. And then the clong returned with the calm of a clock that no one had wound. Operationscentralen. My partner said into his lapel, "Vi kan holde 5 till. Ingenting å utrette. Ingen spår. Ingen tegn til menneske. Anbefaler å varsle Kystverket for inspeksjon av kai." Opfattet, she said. Telekom er på tråden. De siger ID nødtelefon 22 findes fortsat i tabellene for det område, men linje er fysisk fjernet. De ser likevel off-hook hændelser i log. De kan ikke forklare. De markerer for felt. We stood and let the night be what it had decided. The cold found the small bones of the ear and kneaded. The clong found its interval, like it had all the time in the world. I thought about the years this quay had been a little theater of arrivals. Engines idling on the ramp with the handbrake on, a dog scolding at a stranger in the next car, a person walking in circles to keep warm, lifting the little green phone to ask when the last crossing would be. A quay has more conversations than a town square. It hears the things people say when there is nothing else to say. I went back to the pedestal one more time because I wanted to test my own superstition. I stood over where the phone had been and listened for the clong. It didn't get louder. It didn't change at all. I pressed my palm against the concrete and felt nothing but cold and my own heartbeat in my wrist. Good. I prefer when the world refuses to be a neat story. 1-4 OPS said, linjen nettopp koble fra. Ingen sluttone. Timer stoppet på 1932. Telekom-marketer-hendelsen. Veilager, ingen fun med anmodning om kommunalsjekk. There was the small pause, the one you get when they're thinking about what you need. Går det fint med der? SPE. Går fint, I said, aware of the way the ink in. Quay, and you'd see it lit in winter under the one working floodlight. Kids huddled beneath it to get out of the wind waiting for the ferry. They removed it the year the bridge opened to the north. The pedestal bolts stayed like teeth in gum. We turned off the main road. The snow crackled under the tires where the salt had taken and refrozen. We took the last bend with our blue off and our hazard warning down to steady, not because we expected trouble, but because a quay has only so much space, and we didn't need the whole place to know we'd arrived. The ferry ramp was up, chained and locked, the heavy rubber fenders looking like sleeping animals in the spill of our parking lamps. A sign still hung, a leftover, Verja Instilt Bro Open. Someone had drawn a smiley face next to it a summer ago, and the spray of salt had eaten most of the smile. Operationscentralen. 1,000,3 på stedet. Vi checkar kai och område. Up för tätt, she said, and her voice softened a fraction, the way they do when the night wants you to lower your own volume. Linjen fortsatt öppen. Timer 5. Samma bakgrundslid. Arm visar 15 meters variation längs kajfronten. The air at the water has its own temperature. It bit through my trousers like a dog that knows it won't be punished. The smell was old steel and wet rope as much as brine. Somewhere across the fjord, a snowplow made a long white echo you could see. A slow comet running along the far bank and making no sound inside your head. When I stood still, I heard it. Not a beep, not a chime, but a soft, clumsy clong from somewhere down the quay, as if a chain lifted and then settled on a bollard. Then silence long enough to make me doubt I'd heard it. Then again, the clong. We walked the length of the quay the way you do when you know every step by day, and the darkness makes a stranger of it. The ice on the planks had that black sheen it gets when it's been stepped on and refrozen. There were no fresh boot prints except the guards from earlier in the evening when he'd come to check the lock, he told us later, and ours now. The old terminal building was boarded. A plank across the door with a single rust streak where a nail had learned to cry. The small shed where they used to keep chains and de-icer was padlocked and wore the wind like a shawl. Politi, I called low. A quay carries sound too far if you let it. Was du har ringt oss? Giteng. Bank. I recka. My voice did that thing it does at water. It went out and didn't come back. 21,3, Ope said softly. Vi hører politi. Giteng på 112-linjen. PTT hos deg var ikke aktivert. Timer nå 6. I glanced at my handset. Dead. The little orange light dark. I looked at my partner. He lifted an eyebrow. We've both heard our voices where they shouldn't be before upstream echo. Someone on speakerphone, a recording snippet in the wrong place. The way it crawls under the skin a little never really leaves. At the edge of the key, set into concrete discolored like an old bruise, was the pedestal where the emergency phone had lived. 4 bolts in a square, a faded outline where the base had kept sun and rain off the concrete just enough to draw a shape of absence. I put my glove down on it without thinking, palm flat, as if a posture could make something feel like it belonged to the present again. Cold. Of course, the clong again. It was more felt than heard, a mechanical heaviness in the air, patient, wrong only in that it was not attached to any obvious thing. A buoy with a bell? We don't hang bells on buoys in that stretch. It's too close to the ferry ramp for anything that sings in the wind. The chain on the raised ramp could move in a gust and knock. Only the air was still enough that our breath seemed the only moving thing above deck height. Operasjonssentralen. I said, hører samme klong her. Sannsynlig kjettingevind, men vind stille. Ingen kjøretøy. Ingen fotspor ut på isen. Sjekker skur, sjekker kanten. Oppfattet. Calltaker melder systemstemme på linjen et øyeblikk. 112 nødsentralen. Hvilken nødetat? Ikke fra oss. Timer nå 8. We did the human things in the unhuman hour. I took a torch and played the beam along the waterline, careful where I put my boots. The fjord lay like oil, black and flat enough that the light made a pillar down into nothing. No car nose, no line of bubbles, no coat floating where a body would be. The rubber fenders took the beam and ignored it. On the surface, a patch of lighter water moved oddly, a slow circle that could have been anything from a seal to nothing but currents tangling. We have a name for the way a place can make you narrate it, as if that helps. Hendelson, we call it, as if naming makes a box for the unknowable parts. We checked the shed. The lock had that loose play old locks get where they still hold more out of habit than strength. Inside was exactly what should be there. A tub of salt hardened at the corners, 2 coils of chain on pegs, a can of red paint with the lid welded shut by time. The clong came again, and this time my partner and I both looked toward the ramp. The chain on the gate that kept the ramp up was still, its links seated in themselves like fingers sleeping. Får det någon bevegelse i Emil? I asked. Det flytter seg 2 til 3 meter fram og tilbake langs kanten, og PS said, som om noen gikk. Men ingen varme registrert av kamera på stedet. Vi har ingen faste kameraer på det gamle leiet. Timer. Noni. We walked to the outer edge of the quay where the last bollard sits. The paint on the number 4 was scabbed. Our boots made a small theater of noises. The sharp of leather on ice, the squeal of fine crystals under weight, the little rubber grunts of our soles. The water said nothing, except the essential thing it says, which is that it would prefer you in it or out of it, but not troubling its skin. Politi, I called again, in case the person the line belonged to was somewhere in the space that sound could fit. Was du ikke kan snakke slå I rekverket. My knuckle against the metal made a dull report that went up my arm and into my chest. A sound you feel more than hear. 21-3. Opes came, and I could hear keys and low voices in the room behind the voice without her needing to tell me she wasn't alone. Call taker melder. Let banklitter. Polingen. Men de forene til at være for dig. Timer nu 11. Og stand ved tid nå 19. Timer hopp. Audio uendre. I don't love the timer jumps. I know the explanations. Call taker puts the line on hold to check something. System doesn't log the elapsed seconds evenly. The record catches up and fills the box. The reason sits fine in daylight. At the edge of a key in the cold, your body hears knittin' and decides it will store that for later. The sheet of metal that used to hold the emergency phone's instruction card was still bolted to the wall by the terminal building. above the height a child would touch. The cart itself was gone, but you could see where the 4 screws had sunk themselves deep in their little homes, halos of rust. Above it, the light over the old pay gate flickered once, as if there were still a circuit here learning a bad habit from the wind. I made a note to myself to get the municipality to cut that power. Nothing needs to be energized at a dead key. As we turned back toward the car, a ferry horn rolled down the fjord from far away, one deep note that makes you feel the scale of the valley, not from our quay, from the route still running around the headland. It was so ordinary that it steadied me, a sound you expect in a life where things run and stop on time. It stopped the clong for a breath. My mind made them connected because that's what minds do. And then the clong returned with the calm of a clock that no one had wound. Operationscentralen. My partner said into his lapel, "Vi kan holde 5 till. Ingenting å utrette. Ingen spår. Ingen tegn til menneske. Anbefaler å varsle Kystverket for inspeksjon av kai. Opfattet," she said. Telekom er på tråden. De siger ID nødtelefon 22 findes fortsat i tabellene for det område, men linje er fysisk fjernet. De ser likevel off-hook hændelser i log. De kan ikke forklare. De markerer for felt. We stood and let the night be what it had decided. The cold found the small bones of the ear and kneaded. The clong found its interval, like it had all the time in the world. I thought about the years this quay had been a little theater of arrivals. Engines idling on the ramp with the handbrake on, a dog scolding at a stranger in the next car, a person walking in circles to keep warm, lifting the little green phone to ask when the last crossing would be. A quay has more conversations than a town square. It hears the things people say when there is nothing else to say. I went back to the pedestal one more time because I wanted to test my own superstition. I stood over where the phone had been and listened for the clong. It didn't get louder. It didn't change at all. I pressed my palm against the concrete and felt nothing but cold and my own heartbeat in my wrist. Good. I prefer when the world refuses to be a neat story. 1-4 OPS said, linjen nettopp koble fra. Ingen sluttone. Timer stoppet på 1932. Telekommarkeder hendelsen. Veilager, ingen fun med anmodning om kommunalsjekk. There was the small pause, the one you get when they're thinking about what you need. Går det fint med der? SPE. Går fint, I said, aware of the way the ink in. My pen had tried to become syrup in my pocket. Vi avslutter. We secured the gate on the ramp with a tie because the chain had an easy link that made me uneasy for reasons that had nothing to do with stories, everything to do with the idea of teenagers and a dare. We left a note in the box at the road end, the one the municipal caretaker does check even when no one believes he does, with our case number and a simple request: verify power off to lights, verify removal of any residual line equipment. We drove up to the little lay-by and turned the car to point home. The OPS sent us the technical note before the shift ended. Telecom had written that the line identity, Nod Telefon 22, had been retained in a legacy mapping table even after the physical removal of the phone. The call had entered the system via a mobile, with no subscriber ID, likely roaming against a nearby tower. The identity had been erroneously associated with the legacy entry. The periodic metal clank was probably wind-moving chain against bollard. The timer irregularity could be traced to a call taker switching screens. The prompt we heard on the line was a test phrase, leak. All of that is honest. And if you need it to be enough to turn your car around and go to the next thing, it is. The municipality sent their own. They had gone to the quay, checked the power, found one light still energized on a breaker that was supposed to be cut. They isolated it. The ramp chain had a little play. They tightened it. The old emergency phone conduit had been capped in the terminal box. They recapped it because cap means different things to different pairs of hands. The note ended with "Tak for observation," which is a nice way of saying thank you for paying attention to something that made no noise on a ledger. A week later, day shift, I passed that way on the way to a school talk. In daylight, it was just a piece of concrete that used to have a job and now enjoyed its retirement. The bolts looked less like teeth and more like features of a face. The sign still smiled its salt-eaten smile. The chain didn't move when the little wind that lives there tried it on. The clong belonged to stories that don't perform under the Sunday. Now, when I take that road at 2 in the morning, I turn the radio down half a notch by instinct and listen when the fjord lets me. You won't hear much. Not really. Your car makes its own weather, and the studs on your tires have that soft, steady tick that will drown out your worst ideas if you let it. But if the night is in the right mood, you might get the one sound the world saved for itself. A small, patient clong from a place where a thing used to stand that you phoned when you needed to say, "I am waiting. Can you hear me?" We drove away. We made the log. The bridge takes the traffic now. The key has its emptiness, which it carries fine. Still, a part of me keeps that first minute at the edge of the water, and the open 112 that never said a word, and still asked us to come.